So, now let's discuss what these exercises might bring, what they could turn into. It's a super relevant topic. Well, before I introduce our expert, let's do the following. I want to mention that right now we're raising funds for a vehicle for the Shershny Dovbushi Battalion of Unmanned Systems. This is the 68th Separate Jaeger Brigade. For half a year, they've been destroying the enemy in Pokrovsk, which is currently the hottest area. The guys need vehicles, pickups, to go out on combat missions. And as you can imagine, these are basically consumables in the kill zone, where the intensity is just incredible. Therefore, a collection of 1 million Atrivnias is required. 3 pickup trucks for the guys' trips need to be purchased in the near future. Anyone who wants to participate should participate. This will help Ukraine exhibit. And now Denis Popovich appears on our air, providing military analysis, which we are always happy to see. Denis, hello. How do you like the ongoing Zepad 2025 exercise, which is currently taking place in Belarus? There are so many innovations there. I read that 65 Indian troops are taking part there. Economists wrote that these are some kind of red lines moved from the Indian side, but I read that American troops have also appeared there. Could you please tell us what caught your attention?
The Russian Vankas and Fedkas need to be shown what kind of trash is driving around at these exercises, because in my opinion, they haven't seen anything like this at the front for the past 2 years. Everyone is attacking Ukrainian positions in Zhigulis, Nivas, scooters, and Aslas, but at these Zapad 2025 exercises, we even saw tanks, and that means there were also IFVs and infantry fighting vehicles under the grills. So basically everything that the Russian Federation is lacking at the front has gone off to impress the West at exercises in Belarus. That's what can be said right off the bat. This exercise is a demonstration. Right now we're seeing footage from these maneuvers, a demonstration of military might to the west. Against the backdrop of all the provocations involving Poland and the hybrid actions that the Russian Federation is carrying out, including against member countries of the North Atlantic Alliance, we are now witnessing saber rattling at the Zapad 2025 exercises. They are basically wrapping up today. Tomorrow is the last day, and the closing ceremony will obviously take place. Any provocations, invasions, or direct actions of any kind. I didn't expect them before, and now I certainly don't expect them. But as I have said many times before, and I want to repeat it again, we need to closely monitor whether the troops that participated in these exercises will return to the territory of the Russian Federation to their permanent bases. If this does not happen, if they continue to accumulate there, if forces are redeployed as they were before the invasion of Ukraine, then we will need to closely monitor where these forces are being directed and draw the appropriate conclusions. For now, we can state that these maneuvers are coming to an end. Certain forces and capabilities of the Russian Federation have been demonstrated, including missile launches, as well as the use of surface ships, submarines, and accompanying equipment. All of this was aimed at the North Atlantic Alliance. Some further conclusions have been drawn. We know about the presence of American officers at these exercises. We know about the presence of officers from NATO member countries, specifically Hungary and Turkey. We also heard about India. So I think many people have taken note and will continue to analyze what they observe.
Well, in short, you could say the exercise is under control. Let's then talk about what happened in Poland today. Donald Tusk, the Prime Minister, wrote that drones flying over the government district were neutralized and that 2 Belarusian citizens were detained. As I understand it, these citizens were directly involved in coordinating these drone flights, or at least that's what it seems for now, though there are no details yet. Tell us, is this the Russians trolling the Polish air defense again? And for what purpose, if that's the case?
Well, of course, all of this will keep happening. All of this will escalate because despite NATO's response, which is present as we see the borders being closed, by the way, there is a report that Poland does not intend to reopen the borders after the exercises are over. We know that they have closed the borders with Belarus. For now, they are not planning to reopen them until they are sure that the situation does not pose any dangers. A sensible decision on their part, considering the experience of the Russian-Ukrainian war and the intensive exercises that preceded the Russian invasion of Ukrainian territory. It's quite commendable and a very correct action. We are seeing other countries closing their borders, restricting the areas where these exercises are being conducted. We are also seeing the redeployment of aircraft. We are also witnessing specific military activities by the alliance. We can see them. They are noticeable. But unfortunately, the main thing is missing. There is no readiness for modern warfare. We are seeing the result of this raid. 19 or 20 Gerbers, meaning these are drones that do not carry a warhead. Well, roughly speaking, it's a piece of plywood, a flying piece of plywood and foam plastic. It flew across the border. So, for this, they had to involve the forces of 4 countries, scramble Dutch aircraft, scramble Polish aircraft, deploy AWACS, deploy refueling planes, and bring German Patriot systems to combat readiness. And in the end, they shot down 4 Gerbers. Well, excuse me. Unfortunately, you can't call these results good. Therefore, unfortunately, the main thing is missing. There is no readiness for modern warfare. In the Russian Federation, they calculated all this and drew their conclusions. I think that going forward, there will be this kind of hybrid pressure in order to demonstrate all the shortcomings of the alliance, to showcase the capabilities of the Russian Federation, and possibly to force the Church Alliance to end their support for Ukraine, let's say, by making them feel threatened by Russian drones on their own territories. Therefore, of course, the alliance now needs to very seriously learn from the experience of the Ukrainian army, because the Ukrainian army has advanced capabilities and cutting-edge experience in repelling Russian drone attacks.
Dennis, to sum up and wrap up the topic of the exercises, I want to ask, after all, the Eastern Shield exercise is also taking place, and now, for example, the UK is sending its fighter jets to Poland as part of this training operation. In Belarus, they trained at Oreshnik, or at least that's what they boasted about during the exercises with Russia. Tell me, who scared whom more? Was it the Shield or West 2025? Or is it impossible to compare them in terms of scale and scope?
No, I think it was the exercises aimed at Poland that were more frightening. These exercises are being held for the first time, although there were exercises before as well. It was the exercises aimed at Poland that became a kind of watershed moment. After that, people started talking about a no-fly zone over Ukraine, and then about Polish soldiers learning from Ukrainians how to counter these drone attacks. Many statements and public actions followed this incident, which unfortunately, I am sure, will not be the last. In other words, these kinds of things will continue to happen.
I see. Let's talk about the Kupiansk front. There, just like in the Kursk region, the Russians are once again preparing to crawl through the pipes. As I understand it, the Ukrainian armed forces are ready to meet them. So basically, they're really trying to break through the defenses near Kupiansk using various types of pipes, as I understand it. First of all, what do you think of this tactic? Could the Russians succeed again, and could you comment on the situation in this area?
As I understand it, it hasn't worked out for them anymore. In other words, it seems that loophole has been closed. As far as I understand, even if this incident can't be considered completely resolved, at the very least it was monitored and recorded.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
But the point is, we see that the Russians are trying to scale up this tactic. Their first attempt was in Avdiivka, the second was in Svatove, and the third, as we see, is in Kupiansk. And as I understand it, this artery, this pipeline they used to move around, was operational for quite a long time. That is, they set up rest areas there, moved around and gathered in the forest. They even set up launch positions for drones and so on there. In other words, this artery existed for quite a long time. That's why I think we also need to draw conclusions. If Avdiivka was, let's say, a coincidence, the Svatove was a fluke, then Kupiansk has already become a trend, a pattern. We need to take this system into account. And when our guys see various pipelines in their area of responsibility, that is, gas pipelines that can be used to sneak through even within combat formations, these gas pipelines need to be welded shut. Weld them, block them, pour gasoline in, blow them up, and so on. Because the enemy is learning lessons from this, we see that they are trying to act and use these communications to get to us, to our rear. And in Avdiivka, this ended in tragedy, that is, with the loss of the city. So this experience needs to be taken into account.
Drones also struck industrial infrastructure in Saratov and Engels. This is good, this is important. Among other things, and from what I understand, this event directly led to the temporary shutdown of some crucial military enterprises. This was a result of the fire that broke out, which lasted for a considerable duration from 2 in the morning until 5. It is also important to mention that these facilities even produce the advanced plant cover systems, specifically designed for intercepting hostile aerial drones. Please tell us, what do you think about the recent attacks? Are you expecting strikes on oil refineries, and what are the prospects?
We are all waiting for continued strikes on oil refineries. We have embarked on this path, and it needs to be continued because only this path will lead to an effective halt or suspension. In other words, a kind of castration, so to speak, of the Russian oil industry. And only this, in fact, is the very lifeline that enables the Russian Federation to wage war. Before we went on air, I read the Western press, specifically an exclusive from Reuters. They reported information that as a result of these strikes on oil refineries, Russia's oil production might even decrease. Well, because firstly, there's nowhere to process it, secondly, nowhere to store it, and nowhere to transport it. Besides all these refinery strikes, we also hit the ports in recent days. So all of this, as they say, leaves its mark on the Russian oil industry. I also want to repeat, what is this financing? It's Russia's ability to fill its budget and therefore to wage war. And so we need to keep hitting them. In other words, there's still a lot of work ahead. Not all refineries have been shut down. Some of them, even those that were hit, are still continuing to operate. According to some sources, output has decreased by 25%. The level of oil refining in the Russian Federation has decreased. All of this is leading to a fuel crisis, which is spreading and already approaching Moscow. But for now, it mostly affects the civilian sector. For the army to feel it, obviously, more strikes are needed. How many more strikes are needed? Where is the threshold when the army will start to feel the effects of this fuel crisis? Well, unfortunately, that's not a question for me because it requires figures that I don't have regarding the Russian oil industry.
I would note that one of the largest refineries shut down a key unit and its operations after the drone attacks. It's also important to understand that the refineries were attacked last night. But I want to finish by talking about the situation in the Donetsk direction. The armed forces struck the command posts of the occupiers in Donetsk region. After the visit there by the so-called Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, please comment, including on the precise strike during his time in the occupied territories.
All strikes on command posts do not affect the control of the troops conducting combat operations in this direction. That is, the command of the troops, the elimination of generals, the elimination of senior officers can be transferred to the organization. It's clear that if someone is removed from command, obviously someone else will take over the leadership. In other words, in the army, it never happens, or at least it shouldn't happen, that there is no deputy or senior officers who cannot take over the command of a unit. Nevertheless, it is still a psychological blow, and the officer who takes over command may be less competent. Yes, so he might be managing the situation there, and while he is in control, time passes. Still, during combat operations, it's uncertain whether they will find a new officer or not. Whether the new officer, the new commander, will be competent is also a big question. A whole range of different tactics, factors, and problems immediately come into play. That's why any strike against the command has a direct impact on the quality of combat operations for the specific unit that lost its commander. And why the Donetsk region? Because right now, as we know, troops are being concentrated in the Donetsk region in order to try to capture Pokrovsk and take Mirnohrad, to approach Kostiantynivka, to start battles, to engage in fighting for Sloviansk and Kramatorsk, to bring Sloviansk and Kramatorsk into the agglomeration, and before that to take Lyman and Siversk in order to secure these prerequisites for themselves. That's why the enemy will now try to act in this direction, setting exactly these kinds of objectives. They set these goals, but whether they'll achieve them, I personally doubt it. Well, we'll see.
And finally, I would also like to discuss the news about how our border drones are now successfully detecting and systematically dismantling enemy shelters along the front lines. For example, powerful drones like the so-called heavy bomber and the versatile Mavic models are being utilized to take apart the fortifications that the occupiers have constructed. I want to ask you, as a border guard, please tell me, is there currently any threat of a new offensive? I understand that in the context of war, this is probably a somewhat naive and rhetorical question, but nevertheless, we've discussed this both from the Sumy direction and from Belarus. And if these units don't disperse after the exercises, do you see any danger right now?
Of course, they're still far from the Ukrainian border. Right now, there are no changes on Ukraine's border, meaning that in order to launch an operation like Kiev 2.0, if that's what we're talking about, there is currently no such threat. In the Sumy region, yes, there is fighting, but at the moment the enemy has lost the initiative there, and we can say that their attempt to create a buffer zone in the region has failed. This does not pose a threat to the capital. This is not a threat to Sumy either, of course. Yes, they did set themselves the task of creating a threat to Sumy, but for the capital, this does not pose any threat at all. And as for a Kiev 2.0 operation, there are no troops there now. They are not gathering at the border to try to launch another offensive on Kiev.
Yes, it's a funny video. I found one where Putin is shown a pistol and he tries to reload it. He fiddles with the magazine or something. All of this is happening at the Zapad 2025 exercises at the Mulino training ground. It would be something if a strike hit there, maybe even with the American delegation present. But it would be fun. Thank you so much. Denis Popovich, military analyst, was on the air for Ukraine Today. All the best to you.